Well, we'll get started. Just want to introduce Stuart. Stuart is with Nook, and he's done a lot of research and a lot of studying on this topic. So we thought it'd be great to have him do a little presentation. And he's done a CEU. Now, this is not a CEU, but he's taken a lot of that ideas and thoughts and put it into a shorter one that we can sort of try and be able to utilize with our clients. To sit there and go what they're coming up with and why this is such an important field right now. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Stuart. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask or, put it in the chat, either way that you want to do it.
Thanks, Tim. That's much appreciated. And do you want me to mute everybody or just leave it open, which you're seeing as I have control? You tell me.
You can leave it open. I think most people are muted.
Perfect. That's great. So, yeah, no, appreciate the invitation. It's great to be talking about what is an important subject for us, but for everybody. And we wanted to look very quickly at the mind needs a quiet space as the title of this. Which nice job there, Amber, in terms of coming up with the subject, because actually it defines it really well. And for the purpose of this discussion, I wanted to make it sort of, it was supposed to be sort of a drink and a talk, not just a sort of a lecture, as it were. But I wanted to make this a sort of expand the topic a little bit. When we're talking about sort of quiet, I wanted to really include, when we're talking about quiet, to include basically saying what we're talking about is a question of calm, comfort, or even the Danish word hygge, Hygge, which is an all-encompassing feeling of well-being. Because we're talking about we need a quiet space. What we're really talking about is the fact that we need a space to get away from it, to recover, to recharge, and so before we go back into whichever environment we're in. So, Amber, with your permission, I'll sort of talk about the larger subject, not just a question of acoustics, if you don't mind. Now, and again, so we're going to talk about some extreme subjects here, and the reason why we're talking about extreme items such as neurodiversity or extremes in the neurodivergent scale, such as autism spectrum, is because actually we firmly believe, again, that if you design for the extremes, then you're benefiting everybody in between those extremes. And it's not in any way a limiting factor by designing for the extreme. You're not basically saying when you're designing for somebody one arm, you're only designing for somebody with one arm. You design with all the benefits that product will bring. I mean, I think probably sort of my favorite examples is that Alexander Graham Bell created the telephone as a hearing aid for his deaf mother. And so when he started off designing it, he didn't think, oh, well, this will be assistance by deaf mother. It actually turned out to help everybody. The Velcro was designed for the space program, and we all know the benefits of that. So when we've designed our products at Nook, we were looking for how does that, if we can help people on the extremes of the sort of spectrum of the small s, then we're likely to be helping everybody in between that. Which is why the Nooks themselves have been recognized and credited as a certified autism resource. And again, I'll just purely sort of underscoring the fact that everything we do is designed to sort of help the extremes, so it helps all of us in the middle. Now, a quick look at what is neurodiversity, because you may have come across this term before, and my apologies if you're very familiar with this, but I'll whip through all these very quickly. The definition of neurodiversity is, and there's 7 different definitions of it, and there are sort of some competing sort of thought lines in terms of how it should be defined. But the way that we've looked at it is that sort of neurodiversity is identifying the fact that we're all different, that our brains work differently, that we have variations in the way we think, learn and work, and that's just a normal part of who we are as humans. And it's important, but at the same time, it's important that we identify what those differences are, so we can then provide resources that make those differences, that help with those differences, or support those differences in the best way we can. So again, standard way. You can't manage where you don't measure. In this particular case, what we're trying to do is define those neurodiverse differences by putting some more sort of specific definitions to it. In brief, there is no question. Nobody has a normal or a healthy brain. Neurodiversity isn't an affliction; it's just an identification of how people are different. I mean, just for example, if you take classic definitions, that's 1 in 8 people basically are classified as neurodivergent. But fewer than half of those of neurodivergent adults know what their classification is. Now, if they don't know what it is, they can't help. So we can't help with that. So it's also important to point out the fact that neurodivergence exists, in this definition, exists as a percentage of the population for reasons. It's because we need them. I mean, it's the people able to think different from the sort of standard, bring a uniqueness to the world that allows us to move forward in certain areas, and that we need in terms of that we all need basically, and it's one of our strongest areas of resource. Again, within the standard definition of neurodiversity, you would include autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's syndrome, and I don't at this point promise. I promised Tim that I would keep this light. So I'm not going to go into the detail of those, but I think it's important to have a look at how deep how widespread the people who have been classified with this disorder actually are in society. I mean, for example, 1 in 54 children in the US is classified as being on the autism spectrum disorder. 1 in 34 boys, 1 in 44 girls, and basically it means that boys are more likely to be diagnosed by 4 times than girls. That doesn't mean to say that actually that there's a higher incidence of autism spectrum disorder within boys and girls. But I mean, in brief, over the next decade, over 700,000 adults with autism will enter the workforce. Those adults are capable of doing extraordinary things, bringing hyper-focus, concentration, higher than average IQ, and they will be joining us. I mean, as you see, that's a huge number of people there. The ADHD, looking at that, affects up to 17% of American children, and 85% of these will carry disorder into adulthood. Almost 11% of adults are currently classified as having ADHD. Dyslexia, obviously affecting people's reading comprehension, affects as many as 43 million Americans at the moment. That's 15%. So when you add all that together, I mean, basically and just going back to this one here, which is the one that actually sort of stunned me, over 700,000 adults will enter the workforce in the next decade who have been classified with autism. So it's a real question of how do we deal with that? How do we make the best out of that situation? And in doing that, we have to understand what challenges to people on neurodiverse people on the neurodivergent scale. What challenges do they have in the workplace? And again, what I think is important here to remember the fact that whilst we're talking about people who are classified with that disability or with that disorder at the time, it actually affects all of us, because we all have a moment when loud noise is affecting our day. We all have a moment when we don't like closed off spaces. We all have a moment where we don't know where we're going because the signage isn't very good. We all have those moments, and that moment may be every day. It may be once a day under different circumstances, or it just may be totally random. But at the end of the day, what we should be doing is actually looking at how can we support and make people more effective by taking account of the disorders and taking account of the neurodiversity that we all have within us, and some of us demonstrate more clearly than others. So let's look a little bit about how we can what the impact of that is. I mean, if we don't support the neurodivergence in our population, we're likely to be less productive. Is the short version of this. 72% more likely to experience depression, anxiety, especially as a result of work. So we not only do we have a responsibility to address that, we're also something that's actually good business to do. And in doing that, we're taking the best out of everybody in our workforce. But that, again, it's not just applying to the workspace, it applies to any common space where people are getting together. It's a question of giving people an environment which effectively, when you think about it, that's actually the core of what the contract furniture industry does for a living. Is they give people an environment where they're likely to be most productive, the happiest, and most satisfying. That leads to good employees, leads to good long-term relationships, and they come back the following day. So how do you define that sanctuary space which actually supports and gives people that space itself? It's it's usually considered to be a quiet, dimly lit space where employees can go to reset, refresh, take a break. And the closest comparison I can give you is to tell you how do you feel when you're at home? When you're in your comfortable space at home? Do you feel safe, content? That's exactly what we're trying to provide in providing a sanctuary space, which then supports the different people and the different ways of thinking of people and those different ways of thinking we have ourselves in the workspace itself. So lighting is important, but it's not just a question of having lights that's dimly lit or that has a demo capability to it. It's a question of allowing the user to define their own lighting within that space that is comfortable for them at that time, that is either brighter or dimmer, which has different elements of this color spectrum. I mean, people may feel more comfortable one time of day with a slightly sort of a lilac tinge to the light, others might feel more comfortable with a green tinge or blue. It's a question of people find their own comfort level and to give them the opportunity to define it for themselves. Comfortable seating, flexible furniture. I mean, again, that's a practical consideration too. How do you get the most out of your space by making it agile? Comfortable seat, nobody's going to sit there unless it's comfortable, obviously. You would use that sanctuary space for a one-on-one meeting, for a quiet conversation. It might support true relaxation, so basically sort of sitting there just thinking about things, or it might be sitting there reading a book, or it might be just focusing and getting some focus work done. But again, giving people the opportunity to have a space they can define for themselves, that they can use, that suits them at that time to be more productive. Sanctuary spaces, when we're talking about sanctuary space, we're talking that nook, right? That huddle space where people can go to sort of to get away from the sort of the larger space itself, the distracting space itself. They allow they provide benefits for all employees, for everybody. But again, they provide that because you're catering to the needs of the neurodiverse. So again, by designing for the extreme, you're benefiting everybody. So a neurodivergence themselves, just to underline this, they bring multiple different benefits to the overall workforce and to the company as a whole. So again, it's a responsibility we have, but it's also it's a productive and profitable move by companies to actually to proactively take the needs of the neurodivergence seriously. When the environment isn't right, when the environment is right, rather, everybody functions at the highest caliber. Everybody feels less anxious, especially nowadays as people going back into the office space. When you look at the sort of why do the sanctuary space benefit neurodivergent? They've been given that level of comfort. So hypersensitive employees have a calm space. Hyposensitive employees gives them an opportunity to basically to be their own extreme without distracting everybody else, and allowing everybody to escape the stress and pressure of the common space around them. Larger companies are identifying the fact that this is good business. They're including revising their HR processes to attract and access neurodivergent populations throughout their organizations around the world. So when we look at the nitty-gritty of what qualities in the sanctuary space benefit the occupants, again, what we're looking at is how the space stimulates the occupants, what they sense in the space. So those senses are shown here: sight, touch, hearing, communication, smell, proximity, collaboration, and it's crucial. That's crucial to employee productivity. When you start designing, to recognize you don't have to be an expert in neurodiversity, but you can consult experts, but it's mostly common sense. I'm going to whip through these very quickly, and there's a lot more detail behind each one of these, and we'd be happy to talk in more detail about how you can design comfort into the overall environment. Lighting is important, but it's not just a question of being dark or dimly lit. It's a question of user configurable. Colors, I mean, different colors, and again, you can bring that color through lighting, or you can bring it through, as you've shown here, or you could bring it in through the actual sort of, but through paint or through other surfaces around. But again, color is important. I mean, different colors help and work differently with different people. Let's not forget about shapes. Again, when you're designing simple patterns, using simple shapes, allow for clearer thought. That's a quick summary. There's a long detail that goes behind that. Texture, again, is very important. Don't make, don't bring in fabrics, don't bring in tactile substances that actually are going to mean you sort of shying away from spaces. Sound, which is the first one that comes to mind, because obviously, again, in today's open plan environment, which is designed to promote collaboration, in essence, what all that's done is basically promote the sale of headphones. People need a space to get away from the overall hubbub, the overall loudness of an office. But it's not just a question of going for a quiet space, it's a question of going for a quieter space in some cases. Sometimes some of the spaces that are provided, so the phone booths, are actually almost hermetically sealed, and they're too quiet. You feel disconnected from everything that's going on. So it's important that you're able to find a space that, again, that allows you to get away from things, but not being disconnected from everything that's going on around you. Spacing, again, it's common sense here. Basically, give people the opportunity to be as close or as far away from everybody else, or from structures as they feel comfortable with. Which goes to the element of boundaries, right? If you're looking for an area of sanctuary, then you probably want something which gives a physical boundary. So it enables you to give permission if people are getting into your space. So overall, I mean, there are multiple different ways that you can design for neurodivergent friendly sanctuary space. And on the basis that is going to help everybody in the organization. So, but if you took that to its logical extreme, what you would actually be doing is providing different spaces throughout the building, which are furnished differently in different color schemes to suit where you've got individual spaces for different needs. Now, realistically, that's not practical. Nobody's got the budget for an unlimited floor plan. Or unlimited resources within that. So at the same time, it is important that the spread of need is such where you need to be able to provide all of this. So, and the essence, the next stage will be, well, how can I provide that, and something that's configurable, which is user configurable, and which is why we come to the Nook. Basically, this is exactly what we've done. We've taken individual spaces which are user configurable, and therefore fulfill multiple different needs on multiple different occasions, depending on the need, on the requirement of the particular user at the time. Again, the key thing is to make practical use of your floor space. So we're looking at if you haven't had the opportunity to use a Nook, you would see that they're designed to be to make accurate, to useful use of your floor space, and to provide a an effective and efficient footprint, but at the same time feel spacious for the user itself. And all of our Nooks are designed to provide that multiple different opportunity to be able to, for the user to configure their space, to give them all those different advantages within one particular unit itself. So unfortunately, once I start talking about Nook, I'll talk about Nook all day long. So at that point, I try to keep it as brief as possible. Tim, Amber, is there some areas I should sort of stress on here, because realistically, it's I see the Nook as the Swiss Army knife of product. It does everything, and it does everything in different ways depending what you need as an individual. So on that note, any questions? I'm sure, I know I didn't cover it that well, so there must be lots of questions going on out there for me. So please let me know.
Hey, Stuart, can you bring up the sensory Nook just to sort of show what a sensory Nook is? And just to let everybody know that this has been a big topic. You know, if you haven't seen it, we had 60 Minutes ran one of their segments last year on people bringing, people on the spectrum into the office place and finding out that they're phenomenal as far as the jobs that they can do when you put them in the right position in the right place. I know JP Morgan Chase is one of the big ones that's looking at it. And then obviously the ones that Stuart had up there earlier. And then I can't tell you that Stuart and Nook are at just about every major show. And, at NeoCon, there was, I don't know, 50 Nooks around.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing the response that people give to them as far as, showing what you can do with it and what you can't. And then also as far as understanding why it has to be. We were also at the healthcare show. Mm-hmm. And the response we got from the hospitals was big. We were also at Ed Spaces, which is generally geared more through the K through 12 market. Mm-hmm. And the response we got as far as the whole sensory Nook was just amazing. And sitting there going, yes, we need these. And this is an important part. And even companies just coming up, sitting there saying how much they thought it was needed. But anyways, the sensory Nook, I'll let you talk a little about the sensory Nook.
And Tim, you're exactly right. I mean, and people, looking at sort of the reaction to the Nook at NeoCon, for example, this is our third NeoCon we've done, and we've literally put them down the walls on the 7th floor for people to use. And the reason why we do what we do is because we first of all saw the fact that people are naturally attracted to the space, because everybody's looking for that element of sanctuary. And in the education environment, particularly, there is an increase. My wife's a school psychologist, and she comes across this all the time. There's an increased need, or there's an increased awareness of schools and school districts in the fact that they need to be more, shall I say, enlightened approach to mental health, rather than saying, right, okay, mental health is a disruptive process, so that we need to remove so that everybody else can start learning. There's a clear recognition of the fact that everybody's mental health, which includes people on the spectrum, but also includes everybody else itself, should be considered. So rather than taking a person who's about to have a meltdown because they're overstimulated in an environment, away from the environment they're in, to go to calm down quietly and not affect and not disturb everybody else. There's an element here of bringing the solution to the user, so which is where the sensory nook came in, which is effectively they could be configured to be everything from just a quiet space, but through to a mini sensory room, depending how the school wants to, or how the organization wants to configure them. But the overriding thought process is basically sort of give people that opportunity to calm down, giving people that opportunity to find their own space, but still be part of everything that's going on around them. So not excluded from them. And I think a great example for that is are the sensory nooks we're putting into sports stadiums at the moment. We had them, for example, at initially the Allegiant Stadium at the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas, obviously, with the thought basically that people there who feel feeling overwhelmed, whether they're on the spectrum or not, were feeling overwhelmed with and overstimulated with the environment, are able to find somewhere that actually allows them to recalibrate, to sort of, I say hide away a little bit, but just for a little bit, just to sort of recalibrate, refocus, and then go back into the environment. Because the alternative is that either people become disruptive or they leave. And when they leave, they take not just themselves, they take everybody else who's with them. And it becomes not a very enjoyable, enjoyable experience for anybody. In this particular case, we put sensory nooks around the concourses so that people can just basically go, it's near where they are, they see it there, it automatically drives them as being a nice, quiet, special place to go. And then they use it, they sort of reconfigure and recalibrate, and off they go again. And the same, again, there's also a growing awareness in the corporate environment that giving people wellness spaces isn't just fancy, it's actually, it's useful. We've all heard about sort of the Googles and the slides and all that good stuff, right? But what they were all grasping for was actually giving people an environment that was attracted to them. Nooks are great for that, because if you sit in one, if you haven't had an opportunity to do so, then please ask Tim, because I know he's got one in the showroom there. You're sitting in this, it's like you're in a bubble. You're actually almost in a sort of, and there's a cone of silence, but more like a sort of a cone of quiet, should I say, but you're still, everything is going on around you. You're still part of everything that's going on, but you've got your own quiet space. And my final sort of thought on this subject, which underlined the whole process for me, the first time we brought nooks into NearCon, I was trying to they were busy all the time, and I was trying to show the nook to somebody coming through. And there's this one gentleman who had been using it for a couple of hours and doing conference calls. He was doing some of his emails, he was doing video calling, all in the middle of NearCon. I'm going, well, great, good for you. So I went along to him and said, yeah, I'm very sorry. I mean, I'm glad you're enjoying the nook. That's what we brought them here for. But would you mind? I need to show this nook to this gentleman here. And without missing a beat, he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hog it. I said, absolutely. And he moved over to let us in. No, he didn't get out. He moved over to let us in. In his mind, it was his space, right? And that's exactly the kind of mini environment that we create within these. And again, that's whether it's the trade shows, whether it's an office, whether it's in hospital areas where people want for some quiet while they're there to see sick relatives or friends, or whether it's in a school where they're looking to help those with sensory needs in sensory pupils, sensory students. So yeah, I mean, multiple different uses, and that's a very long answer to a very short question, Tim. My apologies.
No problem. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. If not, what we're going to do is we'll do the drawing for the giveaway at a little later, just because we want to make sure whoever was on here was included in it and not anybody who just signed up. So we will send an email out and an email blast as far as that. But does anybody have any questions for Stuart?
Hey, Tim, it's Michelle. I just wanted to just mention one thing that Stuart shared with us when we were at Ed Spaces. in that you can get an optional panel to kind of hide those casters on the bottom there for educational applications, which is kind of important. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that arose because one of the colleges we were talking to was concerned that they would be doing nook racing at midnight down the dorm rooms. So
Exactly.
Never.
which I wanted to see, but they didn't think it would be a good idea.
Stuart, I have a question. The sensory nook is almost always seen in purple, and you mentioned
You're on.
the importance.
You're on.
Mute, but I
Yeah.
thought maybe they could hear me through.
I can hear you through Tim's mic.
Can
It's
you hear
great.
me?
Yeah, okay. I can. Oh, here we go. And I can't unmute everybody. All right. Yeah. So basically, Amber, just let me do that. There we go. I can't. You can do it yourself. I know. The reason why the sensory ones are shown in that lilac color is because actually that's considered to be the most calming color. So as standard, we've actually we produced the ones for schools generally, so they play the sort of the vinyl that we use, which is sort of play graded, we generally deliver it in vinyl because that's the one. It's cleans well, doesn't show the dirt, but actually is considered to be calming. But you can actually have the same effect by just using the lighting functions in there. It's a good question, though.
Nobody has any questions. Thank you so much.
Well,
Appreciate
thank you.
everybody stopping in.
No, I appreciate the invitation. Actually, what I'm going to do is once I can find my cursor again, I am going to give you control back, Tim, but I don't know how to find my cursor. There we go. There we go. It keeps disappearing. No. Tim, you're not on the call, apparently. No, there we go.
I'm not. Oh my
No,
gosh.
there you go. There you go. You're on now. There you go. All right. So, well, great. Well, thank you again for the introduction. I mean, again, we have a passion for the subject of supporting neurodiversity, but it's not just a great mission. It's actually very, very, very practical, and from a company's perspective, potentially very profitable.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hope everybody has a great holiday.
Yeah.
Oh, and Tracy, by the way, great Christmas tree behind you, Tracy.
Yeah, and Pete.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Great, thank you.